What was your worst first date? Story 1. He took it out. And I don't mean this in a funny, unexpected Seinfeld kind of way, although I suppose it is that. I mean, he leaned across the table and whispered, "I'm out." I said, "Excuse me?" For some reason, my first thought was, out of the closet. He said, "Out, under the table, look under the table." And, like an idiot, I looked. Then he said, "That's what you do to me." I said, "This is what you do to me." And I left. I'm a people pleaser, so to this day, I'm proud of myself for walking away in the middle of dinner. You should have commented on how tiny it was, or asked where it was. I probably would have yelled at him and embarrassed him. It would have really pissed me off. I'm tired of men assuming that I want to see their member. That started when I was a kid and continued until I was in a wheelchair. Now I'm invisible. I'm not sure if that's better or worse than mine. I drove him home after coffee. His car was in the shop, and he grabbed my hand resting on the center console as I came to a stop outside his place. Then he shoved my hand down his pants and held it tightly around his package. I stared at him for a second in shock and horror, complete disbelief. Then I reached down with my free hand to undo our seatbelts, leaned forward as if to kiss him, and then opened the door and shoulder checked him out onto the ground. Then I took off. I used all of my disinfectant wipes to clean my hands as I drove away. He wasn't an awful date until that moment. I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for a second date. Just why did he think that was his best move? How many women did he try that on, or was I just special? So gross. This deserves jail time. Story 2. I picked her up, and she asked me if we could stop by her mom's house so that she could run in and grab something. I said sure, made the stop. She went inside. 5 minutes later, she came out hustling towards the car with a car seat and her mom chasing after her yelling. She opens the car door and throws the car seat, which I now see has a baby in it, and starts yelling at me to drive. I freaked and just turned my car off and took the keys out of the ignition. Her mom called the cops, and they came and questioned all of us for a good while. Turns out she had lost custody due to drug use and was trying to use me as a way to get her kid back. We never made it to dinner, and I just went home after the cops left. Reminds me of the time I met up with a Tinder date for some Netflix and chill. When I show up, she throws a large backpack over the fence and then hops over into the front yard. She gets in the car and I ask what the bag is for. She had sprung herself from her sober living home, and once you do that, you're banned from returning. She then asked if we could stop at a liquor store to grab some vodka, which I refused for obvious moral reasons. I dropped her off at the nearest fast food joint. She refused to leave my car and begged to stay at my parents' house. I just threw her bag out of my car, and when she went after it, I closed the door and sped off. People are really using Tinder for different purposes these days. Story 3. He tried to change my order with the waitress because I didn't order what he'd recommended. I went out to dinner with a guy. I ordered my steak medium rare after he ordered his well done. Suddenly, I was making him look less manly, somehow, with my preference for steak. He changes his order to match mine and then bitches all night about how well done is better. Dude, just get it however you freaking want. I was invited on a dinner date. It was a weeknight, so I had to get home from work, walk my dog, etc. before I could meet him. I arrived on time and the waitress came to take our order. I ordered first, then she got to him and he said, "No thanks, I already ate." I'm sorry, what? It was a while ago at this point, so I can't quite recall for certain, but it couldn't have been later than 8 p.m. that we were meeting. I asked him why he wasn't eating and he said he was on a super strict schedule and had to eat before we met as our meeting time was too late. So I sat there and ate while this guy just watched, and we tried to make conversation. Then the bill came and he didn't touch it. I can kind of understand that part because he didn't eat, but he asked me to dinner and agreed to the time I proposed. That doesn't seem too weird to me. 8 p.m. is pretty late, but it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't pay for the bill if he invited you out to dinner and agreed to the time that you suggested. Story 4. Met a girl at a friend's party. We were both in our mid-20s, ended up spending 3 hours talking, and she was so funny, charming, gorgeous, and carefree. I asked her out and got a wonderful "I would love to" from her. I showed up about 4 days later at the restaurant she picked, one within walking distance of her place. She arrived about 5 minutes later. "Nice place," I say as I get her chair for her. "Since it's so close, do you eat here often?" She scowls and responds, "You know, you ask too many fucking questions." I was floored. Everything continued downhill from there. Within about 20 minutes, she just got up and left. I felt as if she had failed to tell me the other night that she had an evil twin, and that's who showed up this evening. Later, when I ran into my buddy, I asked what the heck was up. "Oh yeah," he said, "she's a piece of work until she gets a few drinks in her, then she's adorable." Thanks a lot, buddy. Your story just brought back a memory. In college, some friends and I were heading to a Halloween party, and a couple of other friends of theirs that I hadn't met came along. One was a gorgeous girl who I really hit it off with. We both got really drunk and hooked up at the party. A couple of days later, I texted her and asked her out on a date. I picked her up and she's instantly talking about how in high school she was hooking up with her sports coach on the side. She was 17 and he was 25. She kept circling the conversation back to this coach that she had screwed a few years back. She was a college junior at this point. I played along and told some stories about my exes as well, but she'd just look annoyed and bring the conversation back to the coach. It was really weird. After dinner, I asked if she wanted to come back to my place. She declined, and that was that. A few days later, my buddy who had invited her to the Halloween party called me up laughing, asking how our date went. Apparently, he had had nearly the same experience I had when they first met the year before. Hooked up drunk, went on a date, and she just talked about this high school coach. Looking back, it's kind of sad. She was probably used by this guy in a position of power over her and couldn't get over him. At the time, we just thought it was hilarious though. This is my sister. Prides herself on being the most difficult to deal with person on earth. Drinks a little, is nothing but kind to everyone in any way possible. Drinks a lot, 15 minutes later, she's smashing bottles and punching cops. We found a way to keep her right in the pocket for a while by keeping her occupied with tasks away from booze. Then later, when she figures it out, we over-encourage her to drink and poof, passes out in 10 minutes. Rinse and repeat tomorrow. That sure sounds unhealthy. Story 5. Went to dinner with a girl who I'd been crushing on for quite some time. It seemed to be going well, and we ended up back at her place watching a movie or something. Out of nowhere, her boyfriend, of whom I was not aware, came back from out of town and stopped in unexpectedly. He and I had a super awkward conversation for a few minutes, and then the two of them disappeared into another room for a minute or two. She came back and said something to the effect of, "I don't have a place for you. I'm sorry. I just kind of got in my car and drove home," with one of the strangest feelings that I'd ever felt. At some point, a few minutes into the journey, I couldn't contain myself and busted out laughing. Similar event, even though it wasn't a date, a woman I worked with, who was married with 2 boys, learned that I played the drums and asked me if I could give one of her sons a snare drum lesson. I went to her house at the time that she gave me. The kid seemed only moderately interested in drums. As I was teaching him basic rudiments, the boy's father came to visit. That's when I learned the woman was separated. I wasn't at all attracted to her and had no sense that this was going on. I thought I was a helpful drumming instructor. Then I realized she'd planned the whole thing out to happen as it did. The dad didn't care at all. He seemed happy to get away from her, and I'm sure thought I was romantically involved. I was about 26 and in no way considering being anyone's stepdad or whatever. After it ended, the woman wound up semi-stalking my mom, who was retired at that point and working in the video section of our town's library right across from the woman's apartment. My mom called me one day to say someone came in asking about me, and when she said the name, it gave me chills. That went on for a while, and eventually she disappeared from work and the rest of my life pretty quickly, thankfully. I had a sort of similar experience. I met a girl on a dating app way back in the day, and we ended up playing pool with her sister. About an hour in, my date started chatting up a guy at the pool hall that she apparently knew. They disappear for a bit, and the sister comes up to me and sticks her tongue in my mouth. I leave and go tell my date that this isn't going to work, and she is outside making out with the dude that she was talking to. To this day, I don't know if her sister trying to make out with me was to cover for her. Whoa, that family is running the table. Damn. Story 6. The guy told me he would still be together with his kid's mom if she had apologized for what she did wrong. Out of curiosity, I asked what she did wrong. Was expecting something like she cheated, something that actually needed apologizing for. Nope, apparently she kept nagging one day and wouldn't shut up, so he tied her to a computer chair and went out for 3 hours and left her there. I said it didn't sound like she was the one who needed to apologize and left. I hope she ran fast. Story 7. One was the time I took this girl to dinner and she could not stop staring at our waiter. I'll grant her one thing. I'm a guy and can admit this guy was probably totally hot for anyone who prefers men. Square-jawed and muscled college athlete type, I get it. But I didn't appreciate that she literally craned her neck every time the kitchen door swung open to see if he was walking out. Eventually, I gave her enough cash to pay for my part of the meal, told her I'd noticed, as though I couldn't have, suggested to her that she could get his contact info when she paid the bill, and left. I feel terrible now. I've been on the other side of this situation. I was playing drums in a bar, and there was this really cute girl dancing with a guy. I noticed her because she would not stop staring at me. Sure enough, when I'm packing my stuff away in a hurry to run off to another gig, she comes over to the stage to ask me to put my number in her phone. Okay, maybe the feller that she was dancing with was just a friend. I ask her if she's having a good night. Yeah, I'm on a first date right now. I was dumbfounded. Ha, reminds me of the first time I met my now wife. Not a date at all, just a big formal meal where I'd ask my brother if there were any single ladies, so he'd sit me next to her. He knew her through her dad, who I'd already met at my brother's stag do. She spent the night talking loudly and trying to get the number of a waiter, so I barely said a word. She told me years later she thought I was really arrogant because I didn't talk to her much. I explained it was hard when she was talking all the time and was interested in the waiter. Didn't see her again for a few months until the day before my brother's wedding, when a load of us played cards at her dad's house. Then the next day at the wedding, we got talking. She added me on Facebook the next day, and we soon arranged a date, and that was it. Married with 3 kids now. She told me she saw me at her dad's house before the wedding and was suddenly attracted to me, despite not feeling that way at all when we met. People are odd sometimes. I hope she doesn't still talk loudly. Story 8. Nothing obvious or overt, but from the minute we sat down to eat, the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I felt unsafe. He was polite, listened, and very polished, but could not shake that feeling. I drove to the restaurant to meet, so he did not know where I lived. After dinner, he asked for another date, and I just said, no, I don't think we are a good match. Gave him money to pay for my half, said goodbye when I got to the door, turned around, and he was staring at me with an expression I never hope to see again. I ran to my car, moved it to another spot, and waited until he left before I left so that he could not follow. The restaurant was on an isolated road, so that was safer than him having to catch up to me. Found out that about a year later he was sent to prison for the assault of 2 different women. It happened on the first date. Never used a dating site again. I'm a guy and had a similar date early last year, except I didn't listen to my gut. I thought it was just nerves or anxiety. After getting me drunk, she knew I hadn't eaten all day and I joked about being a lightweight. We left the bar and I started talking about how I like to see how things go when dating and take it easy. She kept interrupting me by saying, "So you want to just come back to my place?" After the 3rd time, I asked where the train station was. She said, "Why? You've got to make sure I get home first. Just come back to mine." And in my drunk state, I felt like I had to go. It was an awful experience to say the least. Fortunately, the alcohol and mild panic attack meant I couldn't perform, but I still felt trapped and like I couldn't leave. After I left the next morning, it took me a few days to process what happened, and I messaged her to say I didn't think a second date was in the cards. The response was a solid block of text that stretched for 2 pages filled with vitriol, hate, and gaslighting. Nowhere near as serious as dodging a serial rapist, but still traumatic. People should always follow their instincts when on a date. That gut feeling reminds my teammate at work. We are a team of 15 people, but 2 women. We were selected by a group of people to start a new project, and we got an office just for us so that we could work efficiently. After a week or so, I had lunch with my female colleague and I told her that I have really weird feelings when I'm around one of the male colleagues, like scary and uncomfortable. And she was like, "Right? Me too." We discussed it and agreed that this guy is like really creepy. Well, I don't know anything about this guy's personal life, and not long after the COVID happened, and I have worked from home since then, I haven't seen that guy for a few years. I have to say that that other team guys don't like him either. I know I don't have any particular reason not to like that guy, but those feelings are real, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. Women have pretty much been conditioned to have that gut feeling by now. Story 9. This story is always fun to tell. Basically, we got back to her place after dinner and we were getting slightly freaky on the couch. As things started escalating, she pulled out a giant glass jar, like the ones with the finger loop thing that pirates put rum in, half full of a clear liquid. My dumbass asked her if it was moonshine or vodka or something. She then proceeded to explain to me that it's pure GHB and that she has a fetish about getting drugged off of it before having sex, and she said that with a completely serious face. For those of you who don't know, GHB is a date rape drug. She then went to the restroom and I noped out of there so fast that I practically levitated off the couch and never spoke to her again. I would have asked her to put some in a to-go cup so that I could bring some home. The effects of GHB depend on how much is taken though. I'm assuming by the way you're talking about it, she was going for closer to the unconscious end of the spectrum and looking for CNC play, which is some weird stuff to even mention on a first date, but certain doses can actually make you feel more awake and give you a high along the lines of what you get from MDMA. It's known as a date rape drug, but it's not entirely uncommon for people to take it intentionally for recreation. I wouldn't take my chances with that. Story 10. I met this girl on the apps and we were talking and she invited me over hours after matching. Alright, sure. Things are alright through text. Her mom is there and is messed up. Like mixing painkillers and alcohol messed up. She's at the table just mumbling and dozing off and asking me messed up stuff. Then her sister and her boyfriend are there and they're drunk and having a screaming match fight while we're all just talking and hanging out at the table. She seemed more normal than the other three and most of the time she was just talking about her daughter, and she's older, about 9 or 10, and is complaining about how she lives in another state and she's never had custody of her, and complaining how we lived in a screwed up state that always gives custody to the fathers. Which is a lie. I live in Colorado and I never met any divorced dads with full custody unless the mom straight up left and even lived with my mom after my parents divorced when I would have been better off with my dad. So I leave and she asks about a second date, and I tell her, sorry to be blunt, but that was a freak show and I was very uncomfortable and I don't think we'll align. She goes off on me and how everyone has a crazy mom, it's normal, and how drunk people fight, it's what they do, and how I sound like CPS and that I was a weirdo, and started hurling insults at me and then said I should have disclosed my medical condition. I have no clue what she was talking about. It didn't need to be like that. I would have picked her up, taken her to dinner and a movie or a walk or literally anything, but no, she straight up told me to come to her house with her drugged up mom, drunk sister and boyfriend with zero warning. This is why ghosting is a thing. Story 11. 2 times. Farmer dude added me on MySpace. Chatting for a while, I can appreciate a country boy. Seemed pleasant. Wanted to meet at McDonald's. Cool, I'm not hard to please. Let's get some Big Macs and chat. We talked for about 10 minutes and clearly it wasn't gonna work. He was almost completely silent. Wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't eat, just sat there. I told him it was nice to meet him, but I had to get home. Later that night, I got about 20 messages telling me how he was into BDSM and wanted me to come over and puke that Mac sauce all over his balls. Yeah, that's a block. Counting Crows dude. Met the guy on a Counting Crows online forum. LMAO, again showing my age, and he happened to live a half hour away. Cool, let's grab drinks at local bar and see where it goes. I got there, couldn't find him anywhere. Figured I was standing up. Then the lights dimmed and he walked out on stage, drunk as hell, slurring every other word, and proceeded to play Round Here and stopped halfway through to vomit on himself. Now I can never hear that song without cracking up. Maria came from Nashville with a suitcase in her hole, just throws up everywhere. Odd that both instances involved puking to some degree. Hey, the second guy just has trouble acting normal when he's nervous. The first guy though. Story 12. I asked about his hobbies and he said, I play the bagpipes. I thought that was really cool and asked him to tell me more. He said, are you sure? And I said, yes. He proceeds to go on about bagpipes for the rest of the night. How he felt playing the bagpipes was his calling in life. How he needed to carry his grandfather's legacy, who also played the bagpipes. How his dream was to play bagpipes for the Queen. His favorite brand of bagpipes. The anatomy of bagpipes. Every topic was somehow turned back to bagpipes. To be be fair, I did say yes to him telling me more. I hope he's doing well and found someone just as passionate about bagpipes as him. I weirdly also had a bad first date with a guy obsessed with bagpipes. His dating profile said he was going through a career change and provided a lot of detail about his past job and his decision to make a change, and that he was now studying for an exam for his new career. I asked how that was going. Now I play the bagpipes. He told me while seemingly perplexed that I didn't know about his change in plan. Oh? He was working part-time in a band playing the bagpipes. He then proceeded to talk non-stop through the meal about his love for them until we finished, and I managed to flag down the server for the bill. He told me he enjoyed our conversation and invited me for coffee. I declined. Hey, I'm Team Bagpipe. Those guys seem cool. Story 13. While we were having lunch, we ran into some friend of hers I didn't know, and he stopped to say hi, and their brief conversation somehow brought up that she owed the guy a meal because he'd paid for their last lunch together. So she offered to pay for his lunch to square it away, and he agreed. He ordered something to go, and they told the waitress she'd pay for it. They both said their goodbyes, and the guy left us alone to go wait for his lunch at some other table. So far so good, though their conversation was a bit strange. It did seem like it came up organically. It didn't needlessly drag on, and the guy was nice at all times and also polite enough to make himself scarce as soon as possible instead of inserting himself into our lunch date with the excuse that he was waiting for his food. So we continued our conversation and everything seemed fine, until sometime later after the friend had already left and it was time to settle our check. And I realized this girl obviously expected me to pay for the whole thing, including the lunch she offered to pay for her friend as a way to pay him back for the favor he did her. Now, even if the friend hadn't ordered a pretty pricey meal that cost more than the rest of our check put together, and he had done exactly that, it didn't sit well with me how she had shamelessly decided to pay him back with my money in what seemed like a deliberate scam. So I paid for the whole thing in order to avoid making a scene, but later brought it up and told her that it wasn't cool. She made it clear that she saw nothing wrong with it and said I was being cheap and childish. So I thanked her for her honesty and told her we were done and I wasn't going to be calling her again. She tried to argue that I was overreacting, but I held firm and blocked her a couple of days later because she insisted on texting me to convince me that I was wrong and we should go out again. Some people really live in an alternate dimension. You know, they are probably dating and scamming guys like that. People are crazy. Story 14. The waitress was a lovely young black woman. He referred to her as being attractive for a colored. He touched her, which is not okay. You don't touch your waitress. Made aggressive looks at another table where a family was dining. They were what looked to be Indian and commented loudly that they were what was wrong with America. Had multiple tequila shots. His cologne stank to high heaven. I was so embarrassed. I was raised to be patient and polite, but finally I was like, WTF am I still doing here? I stood up and left, leaving my half-eaten meal on the table. He yelled insults at me as I was leaving. Then, when I was out the door, texted me. Pure trash. I feel like every date is a crapshoot, but damn, you crapped out hard on that one. Story 15. He said nothing. I get he was nervous, but I was engaging. I asked questions that should have led to at least a few sentences of conversation, but no, one-word answers. It was dinner and a movie, so our only opportunity to talk was dinner. It was like pulling teeth. No thanks, no second date. You just described my husband and my first date. The first 2 hours was me talking at him. I asked him to start a conversation twice. The first time he talked about the hot weather. It was July in the Midwest. No crap, dude. And the second time, he looked at me like deer on the headlights and just stammered that he couldn't. I told myself that there was no way I was going to not give him a second chance. His nervousness also meant that our interactions meant something to him. I was upfront and honest. I told him that I saw he was very nervous and that I wanted to continue to see him so that he could feel more comfortable with me enough to have a decent conversation. When we decided to commit to each other, I kept him informed about our progress. I would occasionally tell him that if someone forced me to hypothetically make a decision about spending the rest of my life with him, at that very instant, I would have to say no because I couldn't say for sure that we could get along, but that I was so excited to see where our relationship went because our conversations were improving vastly with each interaction. We've been together for 8 years now. He still is the most self-conscious person I've ever met when it comes to speaking with people he doesn't know. He speaks so much around me now that I have to ask him to hush sometimes. He is the single most sweetest, kind-hearted, honest honest, considerate, supportive, wonderful person I've ever met, and I thank my lucky stars that the other women who brushed him off meant he was available for me. His confidence has also come a long way too. I get to see all the progress he's made and him becoming more comfortable in his own skin. I'm so proud of him. The moral of the story, I'm not saying that anyone is wrong for who they date and who they don't, and if you get a creeper vibe from someone, do not continue to see them. I'm just saying that if you take time to crack at the surface of a stone, you may find a rare gem inside. Yes, he's still quiet around people he doesn't know, but I talk enough for the both of us, and he's content to shine the spotlight on me. Oh god, I've been on a date like this. I tried so hard to make small conversation with him, dropped conversation cues, but he had the personality of a cardboard cutout. I cannot imagine a person being that passive and tactless, and the best part was him pouting when days later I refused a second date. Like, bro, good riddance. My brain cells were dying on the first date. Having a conversation with someone new is exhausting enough. It's just not worth it at that point. Story 16. He referred to every woman as a loser, and we aren't in a country where that is common and harmless. His ex was a loser, his aunt was a loser, some random author he was telling me about for some reason was a loser, etc. The loser doesn't really bother me, but the way he said it was very aggressive and angry. After that, he decided to argue with me about sports and politics and berate me for my choices in those areas. No need for a second date after that. I stopped being friends with the guy because of this. He would talk so badly about most women, even talked about my lady friends who he didn't know personally, called them losers, fatties, ugly, etc. I would get so mad at him and ask him why he was saying that and to stop, and he was like, I'm just kidding, but kept doing it. Ended that friendship. I think he was hurt that his older sister moved to another country and he felt like she abandoned him, something he slightly mentioned, and an ex-girlfriend that I think he never got over. I think that might have triggered him to start acting like that, but I still don't think it was right to say all of those things about other people. Red flag. Dodged a bullet there. Story 17. We went to her place to watch movies, and we chose Kung Fu Panda 2. From the moment it began, she proceeded to cackle at every single joke. Anything that could even be perceived as mildly funny set her off like the Wicked Witch of the West. I know some people have interesting laughs, and that wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't constant from beginning to end. After that, she put on Iron Man and the same thing, which cackled the entire movie. There's a point in the movie where a character's phone goes off and the ringtone is an old Iron Man theme, which made me chuckle. At which she turns to me and says, "You laugh at all the weirdest parts." The second the movie was over, I got out of there and did not see her again. She was probably a part of a live studio audience once. Story 18. It was my first date. I was 17, working as an office assistant's helper. The guy, 20, also worked there. I don't remember what his job title was. He asked me to the drive-in movies. He came to the house and met my mom, did the whole song and dance to her about taking good care of me, getting me home on time, blah blah blah, all that crap. I was still nervous though, so I arranged with 2 friends to go to the same movie in their car. My date didn't know. They parked 3 cars down from us. After we parked, the guy was telling me to relax. He just wanted company for the movie and he respected me. So I'm thinking, cool. The movie started. I don't think the opening credits had finished and he was all over me. It was like he grew 4 extra arms in seconds. I pushed him off of me and said, WTF? He apologized and said he was sorry. He thought I'd like it and he couldn't help himself because I was so cute, whatever. I told him I didn't like it and to keep his hands to himself. I get maybe 2 drinks of my soda down and he tries again. Now I'm pissed. I get out of the car, throw my drink at him, and walk off. I go to my friend's car and get in. The guy didn't see where I went because he was dealing with dripping soda on him in his car. My friends and I left. The following Monday at work was really awkward and he avoided me like the plague, which is why, to this day, I've never again dated anyone I've worked with. This guy sounds like an abuser in the making. No means nothing to him. Story 19. The date was going great, but we were talking about family, friends, and all of that, and I realized that I'd slept with her sister. I didn't really know what to do, but you can't just say, "Oh, your family looks fun, and I slept with your sister not too long ago. Show me more pics of your dog. Is she a lab mix?" I cut the date short after dinner and hoped it'd just fizzle out, but they found out. It was cool though, just an awkward coincidence. At least it wasn't the date's fault this time. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.